Hello, this is Sultana, and today I will continue talking about why it's important for discerning readers to encourage emerging writers, poets, artists, etc. So, for example, in recent months, there has been a sort of resurgence of the need for diversity in the arts and especially in creative writing and fiction. And I totally agree with this approach. I would just like to point out the fact that diversity for me includes not just people from different continents, but also people who have various points of views. We are told constantly that we live in a global village, which is fine, which is okay. However, in this global village, are all the voices being heard? And especially voices that come from that are far away, that are not situated close to publishing centers such as London, New York, etc., in the Anglophone world. So mainly, I would just like to mention that for traditional publishers, usually since it's quite an investment for them, they tend to select writings which they think will yield a return on their investment, to put it mildly, and that's perfectly understandable. However, there are certain, in fact, many emerging writers who have various different kinds of views, different plot structures, different approaches, and so on. So I think in order to have this huge variety in our modern world, we should also encourage emerging writers who are still finding their own way, their own path in the writing world. So, in case you were to like on social media or to subscribe to somebody's channel who is an emerging writer, or if you would like to respond or react to their writings, you would actually be encouraging a diversity in society. Now, why is that important? I think it is important because we have such a complex modern society on all the continents now, and as a whole for humanity, it's important to know all the different possibilities and all the different points of view that exist. And so I would argue that the more variety we have, provided, of course, that they don't incite hate or they don't incite violence, etc., the better it is for society as a whole. I will take a few examples from the past. For example, there is a novel called Anna of the Five Towns by Arnold Bennett, in which the hero is not exactly the sort of hero that that exists in most novels. And for example, there's Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. Again, it's a different kind of hero. And going back, if we go back, trace our footsteps backwards, we have, for example, Greek myths in which the heroes are always flawed. There's a tragedy associated with them. I'm thinking of the myth of Orpheus, who was very talented, brilliant, one of the most talented singers and musicians this world has ever seen. And yet he suffered a fate that was perhaps not merited for no fault of his own. In fact, I am writing a long poem about him, but that's another story, literally. Okay, so yeah, and then, for example, I can give in the description below the titles of a few other books that I found to be contemporary books that I found to be quite interesting, mainly because their approach, their way of thinking is quite different from the mainstream, but nevertheless they are very gripping books. And so I think it is important. I mean, as a reader, if you do encourage emerging writers, poets, artists in some way, you will be actually contributing to creating a more diverse and possibly a more equitable society in balancing the playing field, as it were. Because traditionally, writers, until let's say about 50 years ago, most writers came from privileged backgrounds, and most of them had enough time to write. But a lot of emerging artists, writers, poets are often not necessarily from privileged backgrounds. Most often they are not. So they have to do a job, they have to take care of their families, and then fit in their creative work as well. And of course, after the creative work, you have to do, you have to try and get it published, and then you have to do marketing, etc., which takes a lot of time and possibly a lot of budget. Most people don't realize the amount of work it is. The initial writing takes perhaps less time than all the other steps do. So keeping all these factors in mind, I hope you will be encouraging emerging writers, poets, and artists. And last but not least, if you spread positive vibes, they will come back to you. So what goes around comes around. I think that's pretty sure, or at least it's, even though it